Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo. Bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jedley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We are beaming out to you and the entire planet from the beautiful, book-loving neighborhood of Reedville, the loveliest neighborhood in all of Boston. We are so very, very happy that you are joining us. Here at Reading with Your Kids, our mission is all about connection. Connecting kids with books, families with each other, and communities through the power of story. Every week we're joined by incredible authors and creators whose work lights up kids' lives. We would love for you to help us grow our mission. You can do that by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, Amazon Music, Audible, Player FM. Wherever you find your favorite shows, you can find Reading with Your Kids. Really wonderful show for you today. First up, Kimberly Behre Kenna is here to celebrate Lola Gillette and the summer of second chances. And later in the show, we'll be having a listen back to our conversation with Dr. Anna Housley-Juster. She is celebrating her picture book, How to Train Your Amygdala. This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by the Fred the Snake series, written by Dr. Peter Cotton. I just got back from the COSPA National Education Conference. 1,500 school leaders from across the country. And I have to tell you, one of the biggest smiles at our booth came from a little snake named Fred. We were sharing the Fred the Snake book series, and again, superintendents and educators were drawn in by the bright, colorful illustration. They'd pick up a book, start flipping through it, and you could just see it. They got it. These are the kinds of stories kids want to read. But you know what really stopped them in their tracks? When I told them that the author, Dr. Peter Cotton, was a world-renowned gastroenterologist and teacher before he began writing children's books. And suddenly it clicked. Here's someone who spent a lifetime helping people, now using the same care, the same curiosity to create stories that help kids feel brave, welcome, and excited to learn. The Fred the Snake series now includes 10 wonderful adventures, from getting mended to going to school to exploring cities and beaches with friends, and every one of them is filled with heart, humor, and connection. We loved having Dr. Peter on Reading with Your Kids, and I can tell you, educators at the COSPA conference love Fred the Snake just as much as we do. So if you're looking for stories your kids will laugh with, learn from, and want to read again and again, meet Fred the Snake. Because with Fred the Snake, the real magic happens when we choose kindness and become a friend. Join us right now from the wonderful state of Connecticut. Our guest is here today to celebrate her new middle grade novel. It's called Lola Gillette and the Summer of Second Chances. Please welcome to the show, Kimberly Behre Kenna. Kimberly, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Delighted to have you on. What a great title, Lola Gillette and the Summer of Second Chances. All sorts of things come up in my mind as I'm reading that.
It is. It's full of interest. That's for sure.
So who's Lola? I understand she got herself in a little bit of trouble.
Yes. So Lola's a 13-year-old girl who is still grieving the death of her twin sister from a few years ago, and has decided that she's going to complete this collection that they started called the Perfect Pairs Collection. And she feels that they both felt that if they collected a baker's dozen, it would be magical. So now, with her sister gone, to honor her, Lola's decided she's going to complete this collection. So that's where she got into trouble, because she tried to steal a pair of bobblehead dolls. And, of course, the parents were not happy and sent her for the month of August to her uncle's house, which is this kind of a falling down, dilapidated old mansion that looks like a castle set up on the Connecticut River above it. And so while she's there, she's still convinced she's going to try and get that complete collection, because maybe it'll keep her out of getting sent away to boarding school for doing all the bad things she did. But while she's there, she starts to really connect with her uncle, who himself is grieving his wife's death, but also he's just a different kind of guy. He's an offbeat, reclusive guy. And she starts getting very close to him. So as it goes, her goals change. She wants to finish that collection, but she also wants to help her uncle. And how can that work together? Is she going to, make herself better, or her uncle, or is there a way to balance them both, is the question really that comes into the story.
You and I were talking before we hit record about how lovely the part of the world you're in is, and by the Connecticut River. And I thought it was so funny that Lola gets punished by being sent to the place you love.
That's a very good point that no one has yet pointed out. I do love that place. So during the pandemic, my husband and I were trying to visit a different state park every few weeks. And I'd never been to Gillette Castle State Park. And so we went. And of course, the castle wasn't open because it was during the pandemic, but the grounds were. And I was just enamored with the place. There are trails and cliffs and woods, and it was just beautiful. We made a point of going back and seeing the castle. And while I was in the castle, I couldn't help but think, what kid wouldn't find living here pretty amazing? And so that's how the idea of the story came in. But yes, you're right. Lola feels like she's banished to this forsaken place because she's a city girl. But things change while she's there. So
I can absolutely understand. I just finished an interview with an author in Vermont. And I remember my daughter and her husband were living in Vermont at the time on this beautiful 300-acre farm. And I remember going up and visiting them as things were opening up, and walking along the farm and telling my son-in-law how beautiful it is. And he practically broke down in tears saying, I want to go back to the city.
Oh, isn't that something? I know. Everybody's just so different.
Yes. And that's the beauty. That's what makes the world such a beautiful place.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So I think, Lola, boy, that idea of losing your twin sister, what a powerful thing. My daughter knew casually a twin whose twin, she knew a kid who was a twin, and one of the twins passed away, and it's devastating.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my interest in twins is very personal because I have twin sisters that are 6 years younger than me. So, as I turned 10, 11, I was very involved in helping care for them and so forth. So I very close to them, and I still am. But it's always intrigued me, the connection that twins have, at least my sisters, and that I've read other twins have. They were always very close. They got to adolescence and they were completely different kinds of kids and kind of grew a little bit apart. And now they're adults, 60 years old and doing fine. But what intrigued me was, for instance, the way their minds worked or connected. I don't know really how to describe it. An example of that would be, both of them on Mother's Day, they weren't living at home anymore, but both of them on Mother's Day sent the exact same card to my mother without knowing it. They're just little kinds of things like that occurred with my twin sisters. There's also probably, when I was young, very young, a little bit of jealousy, because in those days, twins weren't very common. They were way less common than these days. So, they were always getting a lot of attention, and, my curiosity was always piqued about their connection. So I enjoyed that. And I always wondered what happens when one loses the other. And, my mind just kept spinning and spinning, and wondering in general how a kid would manage that. And that's how Lola's state of being came to be.
Yeah. I'm just curious, did did your sisters, when they found out about Lola and the circumstances of the book, were they like, were you plotting or something?
Yeah, I did warn them. It was funny because I think I told you before we began, I started writing this book 5 years ago, and only one of my sisters has been a reader for me. You know, she reads everything I write and gives feedback. So no, they were both kind of excited about it. I warned them that it was coming.
Okay.
And this twin, this Lola, actually is a combined version of both of them. So one of my sisters was very rebellious and strong, and then the other sister was a little more shy and mellow and vulnerable. So I think Lola combines a lot of aspects of the three of us sisters, really. And that's when I, really started thinking about what would I do without my sisters? They're a big part of my life, but even as a kid, it would be even harder to think of that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. One of the things that also the book seems to celebrate is the idea of intergenerational friendships. The friendship that grew between Lola and her kind of at first weird uncle. I think there's we've talked a lot about it here in the podcast. I think those are incredibly valuable relationships for so many kids.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm a grandparent now myself, and, treasure my relationship with my grandson and granddaughter. But I think, there is such a rich experience to be gained when they are intergenerational, a younger and an older, whether it's a mentor situation or a relative or just a teacher or a friendship. There's a lot that can be gained on both sides. Mm-hmm. The younger child, obviously, as I said, could be mentored or can really confide sometimes more in that person than their own parents. I know that happened for me, and I know it happened for my kids actually too. So, that's just the way of the world. And then on the other hand, for instance, a very old person enjoys, sharing their life with someone young like that, kind of entrusting their life with that young person. And perhaps that older person lives on in that young person in some way. So it is a really beautiful relationship. You're right.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's a situation that both the younger and the older get so much out of,
I agree.
Yeah. Was there a person in your life since the Lola is kind of a combination of you and your sisters? Was there a creepy uncle in your family?
No, there was no creepy uncle. I wouldn't say I was extremely close to any of my relatives that were older than I. I was very close with a teacher. My 8th grade teacher really seemed to get me. And that was a very special relationship for me. And I think Milo, who's actually based on William Gillette, as in the actor who portrayed Sherlock Holmes, and built that crazy castle here in Connecticut. I wanted to portray him more like William Gillette himself, very loosely, but still full of quirks, just very different. This guy won't leave his castle, his home, because he's so upset about going outside and reliving anything that he used to share with his wife who's passed. So I wanted to portray the quirkiness. And also, I don't know if you know much about William Gillette, but I would really, really encourage you to look him up. It's so interesting. The castle has 47 doors, and he designed each one uniquely, and each one has a hand-designed wooden lock on it, like a wooden latches and different things like that. And then in the castle itself, there are hidden staircases and tables that slide in and out of walls. And there's just some really interesting things. So the term calling him a crazy uncle may come from people who don't know him. And in the book, that does happen. They think there's something wrong with him. And even Lola's parents say anybody with more cats than human friends has to be a little bit off their rocker. But what comes to happen is that this guy, Milo, is highly, regarded because he's got this creative mind and is just really a gift to everybody. Because he spurs us on, he gets us thinking in new ways, and that's kind of what I was trying to portray with Uncle Milo, and to the readers of the book.
Yeah, I one of the things I'm glad you brought up that this was inspired by a visit to a state park. There are beautiful state parks and national parks all throughout the United States, and also there are great provincial parks up in Canada. Over in Ireland, we visited a national park. Take advantage of that. If like you said, what there's 17 state parks in Connecticut.
Oh gosh, I don't even know.
But take advantage. What a beautiful thing for family to do.
It's really beautiful. Anytime you can get outside like that and to, prime land that's just so free and open and natural, it's great.
Yeah. You said it took you 5 years to write this book. Was there anything that in particular that got in the way of it coming out, or was it just that long to get somebody to purchase it?
No, it's kind of typical of 5 years ago. I would say I had a few things going that I was writing, middle grade books. And for me anyway, sometimes I stall out on a story and I'll go to another story. And for me, that's what happened. I ended up finishing up 2 other middle grade books and they were published. And so now, then I went back to Lola. So although I did start that book, Lola, 5 years ago, it's not like it took me 5 years to write it. But that said, it took me the good portion of at least a year to revise and edit and get other people to read it and get feedback on different things. So for me, I don't write that quickly, but not 5 years. I'd say it's more like the good part of a year to write a book.
Yeah. We love encouraging families to read with their kids. And, of course, when people hear that, they think, oh, yeah, I'm going to read my picture books to my 4-year-olds. And it's like, yeah, that's great. But you can continue to read and co-read with your kids when they become independent readers. And I think Lola Gillette and the Summer of Second Chances, it would be a great book to read aloud with your middle grade kids, but also co-read. Grab 2 copies of the book and talk about it on the way to school. If a family did that, what kind of conversations do you think families might be able to have?
Oh, yeah. And first of all, that's why I was excited to come on this show, because your mission is my mission. I write with the hopes that my books I'm a retired fifth grade teacher. And so I write books with the hope that they will be discussed. So my books do have some heavier themes in them, handled, appropriately for the age. But I hope that people will read these books together, that kids will read them with adults, that kids will read them in groups and discuss among themselves. I would hope that there would be conversations about empathy and how we cannot judge and should not judge someone by the way they look or behave. We don't even know what their story is. There could be undercurrents, like with Lola. She may not be the most likable kid at first. But as time goes on, you can see why she acts the way she does. So I hope that it will help kids build empathy and an open mind. But beyond that, I hope that kids that are going through the things in my characters' books, for instance, if they're grieving, like Lola is, or if they don't feel like they belong, I hope that the readers will be able to get joy and hope from this story that ultimately ends with Lola being able to be her authentic self, make friends, and to still honor her sister without having to kind of hide behind her now that she's gone and feeling like she has to be both twins for her parents. So the discussions that parents could have, that teachers could have, that therapists could have with this book and my other book, I think there's just no boundaries on them. And I just think it would be the healthiest thing that could happen for us to have more of those conversations with our children, because especially these days, you don't know who's grieving what. And everybody's probably grieving a whole lot. And these children, if they're not allowed to talk about it, or they don't talk about it, or they're scared to talk about it, it just begins to churn inside. And then ultimately, who knows? So if we can start talking with them at a young age about difficult topics, I think it's a really good thing.
Yeah, I agree. And, I want to take this moment to thank you for teaching for so long. Fifth grade. You reminded me, I've never spoke about her on the podcast, my fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Sarah Beatty. And just wonderful. And as I reflect back, there's certain things, people always joke, sometimes guests will say, hey, can you send me a list of questions? And I always say, no, because I don't use a list of questions. I can't use the list of questions. And my daughter, we had a conversation with a guest when my daughter was helping me with the podcast, and they said, the guest said, what's the script going to be? And my daughter started giggling because she knows, she's been in different productions that I've been in. I just can't I can go up and entertain kids for hours, but I can't do it with the script. And I remember Mrs. Beatty, she selected me to be the lead, and she was this incredibly creative woman who just staged spectacular school assemblies. And we did St. George and the Dragon, and the art teacher made this great, like, Chinese kind of dragon and everything. And she picked me to be one of the leads, and I was terrible. I was reading the script. I was terrible. I know, and I was just reading. How are you?
Yeah.
Nothing. And finally, she just said, she switched me out, and she said, "You're going to be a villager. What do? Do what you think what a villager would do in this situation." And I was improving, and she loved it. And I think that that's part of the reason today. It's like, yeah, I'll be on stage. Don't give me a script. I can't deal with that. Just give me some bullet points and I'll figure out a way to get there.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the effect that teacher had on you. And teachers, I agree. They provide a service, and they are more than just a teacher, while they're in that classroom. But it's a special job. I loved doing it. And the scripting thing, I know I was talking to my niece who just started teaching fifth grade, and she told me that it's scripted, that the curriculum is scripted, that she has something to read. And I thought to myself, I could not do that. I have to be able to, and also things happen in the class that are going to pull you off the script. You got to be able to think on your feet. So that's why I don't like scripted ideas in classrooms.
Yeah. I agree. We've talked about the changes that's happened in education, and don't get me, my beautiful wife taught school in Boston for 34 years. And that's a whole other podcast.
Exactly. I'm with you on that.
So tell me, you mentioned your other book. Tell us quickly about your other book.
So I have two other books, and they're part of the Brave Girl collection is what it's called. And it's not a series, because each book is individual. There are no characters that are repeated, but each book has similar themes. So it's mostly girls finding their voices. And the first book is Artemis Spark and the Sound Seekers Brigade, which takes place in a salt marsh right here in Connecticut. That's the main place. Mm-hmm. And then the second one is Jet Jameson and the Secret Storm, which was inspired by my local library, the Blackstone Library, which is a historical phenomenon. It's just this amazing place. And again, they're all written in a way that I would have liked to have used in my classroom, to have those good discussions we've been talking about.
Fantastic. Well, let's tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Lola Gillette and the Summer of Second Chances, and about all the books that are coming from your imagination.
Yeah, sure. So I would think the best place to find out more about me and my books is my website. It's KimberlyBehreKenna.com, my name, and it's an odd spelling. So it's Kimberly,
Awesome.
BehreKenna.com.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Lola Gillette and the Summer of Second Chances, a new middle grade novel from our guest, Kimberly Behre Kenna. Kimberly, thanks so much for being on Reading with Your Kids.
And thank you for having me. It was really fun.
This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Follow the River by Ellen Cochran. What would you do if you fell from the sky into the Amazon rainforest? That's not fiction. That's the incredible story behind the book Follow the River by Ellen Cochran. On Christmas Eve 1971, 17-year-old Julianne boarded a plane with her mom in Lima, Peru. The destination was home, a research station deep in the Amazon jungle. But just 20 minutes after landing, disaster struck. Lightning hit the plane, and Julianne was thrown 2 miles through the sky into the rainforest below. When she woke up the next day, she was alone. Her collarbone was broken. Her glasses were gone. She only had one shoe, and she was surrounded by one of the most dangerous jungles on Earth. But Julianne remembered the lessons her scientist parents had taught her and began an unbelievable journey through the Amazon. For 11 days, she walked, survived, and followed the water until she found help. Follow the River is a breathtaking story of courage, resilience, and the incredible strength of the human spirit. If your family loves stories like Hatchet or I Survived, this is one adventure you won't want to miss. Discover Follow the River today, a true story that proves that sometimes the greatest survival tool is hope. I am extremely excited. Joining us from just a couple of miles away from our Reedville studios, our guest is here today to celebrate. Her brand new picture book is called How to Train Your Amygdala. Please welcome to the show, Dr. Anna Housley Juster. Hey, Dr. Anna, how are you?
I'm doing well, and feel free to just call me Anna.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm delighted to have you on. Before we start talking about how to train your amygdala, I'm really fascinated and think people would be fascinated to know that you were the Sesame Street content director
Yes.
for many years. What was that experience like?
It was fantastic. Sesame Workshop is a great place to work, and I had started saying I wanted to work on Sesame Street on the show since I was about 10 years old, growing up in Bristol, Rhode Island, also not that far from us. And so it was a dream come true to get an internship when I was in grad school. I moved to New York partly because I wanted to try to get there, and it was a fantastic place to be. I was there for 7 years, and working across the show, so on the license, so all the brands, the show, the interactive media, product development, publishing, and community engagement. Yeah.
It's such an amazing institution, really. It's I'm old, so I wasn't Sesame Street wasn't around when I was in their target audience, but it's been going for what target 60 years, maybe 55.
69. I think it first aired in 69. I'm not positive. It's either 68 or 69. And then when they had the 50th anniversary, not that long ago, a few years ago, the street where the office is in Lincoln Center, where I worked, it's West 63rd Street. They actually named Sesame Street. So if you're in New York, I mean, that's what talk about an institution.
Absolutely.
It has its own name of a street, in the heart of New York City. So it's a fantastic place. And that story of wanting to work there since I was a child is not unique to Sesame Workshop. I'm sorry, it's not unique in myself. There are lots of people there who had decided at some point in their life that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to be part of that magic and the brilliance and the way that they're bringing education to very young children through the play and the humor, the joy of the Muppets and the monsters. And the whole human cast. It's a lot of people that I worked with at the time had always wanted to work there.
Yeah. And what do you think the secret is? Because we're talking over 50 years, kids changed, culture changes. What was funny and acceptable 50 years ago might not be acceptable these days or thought of as funny, but Sesame Street endures.
Well, I think similarly, you and I earlier, before we started recording, we're talking about the power of like trusting kids can understand important concepts, big words, etc. Sesame Street, we never dumbed it down, and it still isn't dumbed down. I think the curriculum that drives everything, which is very well researched, really nuanced, deep understanding of topics. But then you layer on what started off as Jim Henson's brain, just like so much creative genius. And then over the years, Sesame Street has had to change with the times. I mean, it's, I don't want to speak in too much detail about what's happening now because I don't work there anymore at this time. But some of my dear friends still there. They've been there for decades. They have had to evolve. I mean, when the show first came out, there were a handful of options for young children. And now there's probably thousands, at least hundreds. So, I mean, when you think about all of the ways that kids access content today, Sesame has had to reinvent itself to really think about what are the needs of kids today. Some of them haven't changed. We still want kids to learn how to read. We still want them to know how to make a friend. And then some needs have evolved because the world around kids has changed so much.
Yeah. And one of the things we want kids to do is learn how to train their amygdala.
Amygdala, yes.
Say that word.
It is a mouthful at first, but I promise I've had, like I was talking about with you earlier, kids as young as 4 years old can say the word and understand sort of the function of the amygdala in their brain and in their body. So just like at Sesame, where we would have used the real word for things, we would have talked to kids about the vocabulary that can help them live in the world. Same thing here. Yeah.
So let's get into this book. How do we train that part of our brain?
Well, so the amygdala, I've been saying in conversations like this, is sort of the usual suspect for the alarm system in the brain. And we have this threat response that keeps us alive. We're born wired to recognize threat because we're born to survive. We're wired for survival. So the job of the amygdala is to sense danger, to sense threat, and then set off a series of actions in the brain and then coursing through the body through hormones and through other mechanisms to basically get the body ready to fight whatever the intruder, whatever the threat is, run away, or sometimes just freeze, which is why, in my neighborhood we have a gazillion squirrels and I always try to avoid them and I don't like to hit anything, of course, so that if you notice sometimes that's frustrating because you stop and they also stop. Right? They stop in the middle of the road and you're thinking, what are you doing? Like, just move to the other side. Like, someone else might come along in a rush. This is Boston. You never know. And you're going to die. But they went into freeze mode, right? So lots of other animals, not only humans, have an amygdala designed to keep them safe. What I get to in the book is like, this is what it is. And also, it can be a little sensitive. And the character who's driving the narrative, who's this, the character that is the amygdala that's directly speaking to the reader and asking for their help, about a third of the way into the book, makes a mistake. It experiences threat and says, we have to go, we have to fight, we have to freeze, we have to run away, we have to do something, because it's perceiving that there's a dangerous monster at the door, and it turns out to be a small kitten delivering a large cheese pizza, to basically show kids, like, this is a really important part of your brain, and sometimes it makes major mistakes. And then it goes on to, the book through the amygdala teaches strategies you can use to calm that threat response when you can recognize that there isn't an actual threat.
We've talked a lot here on the podcast about the fact that there are so many kids these days that are suffering from anxiety. Certainly more than I was aware of when I was growing up, and even more than I was aware of when my kids were in school. Is this, we're just not learning how to train that, or our kids are, why do you think it might be?
Oh, it's such a good question, and it's not there's not a simple answer, I would say. I obviously, since the beginning of human evolution, and as I said, with other animals, the amygdala has always been there, designed to keep us safe, right? What can happen is if enough scary things happen in your life, like, so certainly, if there's a trauma history in your lived experience, and by definition, trauma means that an experience overwhelms the brain's capacity to cope. So the same thing could be experienced, the same experience could happen to several kids. Not all of them will be traumatized. It's about the relationship between the brain and the experience. And by definition, it's overwhelming, out of control. I am not going to be safe, right? Mm-hmm. That's just, right. That can create a wiring in the brain as you move forward where you can have a hyperactive threat response. So lived experience can make the amygdala more sensitive to perceived threat because it has memory. It knows that it needs to look out for danger, and maybe even more so. So I would say right now in the world, there are a lot of reasons to feel threatened. And so it doesn't surprise me that right now there's an increase in anxiety because there have been several reasons to be anxious. Mm-hmm. I do think there's more awareness now than when, like, you and I were growing up. And I think that's positive, right? And sometimes when parents start to recognize that their kids are anxious, they get anxious about the anxiety. And then you have a relationship between two heightened amygdala threat response, right? And I think I do a lot of work with the parents I work with and in myself, because I'm also a parent with two teenage daughters, to pay attention to when anxiety and maybe a hyperactive amygdala in a child can create the same response in the parent, and then you get kind of stuck. So the awareness is good, but it's how we manage it and what we do with it that I think is really important right now.
So how can we train that instinct so it isn't reacting to kittens delivering pizza at our doorstep?
Right. So first of all, it's about a practice, because I know you're a parent and you've spent a lot of time in your career working with kids. If a child is already in threat response mode and they are panicked, running up to them and saying, it's okay, just take a deep breath. Just take a deep breath right now. Just breathe. It's going to be okay. It sends a message to the brain, like, you are not seeing the fear. Like, you're not seeing what I see. And that can actually increase anxiety. So the strategies that are introduced in the book are designed to become part of a practice, sort of like the way you would get dressed and brush your teeth every day. It's not designed to be just used in the moment. You kind of have to teach it as a practice and then use it when you need it. So the three main types of strategies that the book introduces, and there are many, it's really about figuring out what works best for a specific child or a specific adult that's trying to co-regulate with that child, are controlled breathing, muscle tightening and relaxation, so muscle, like progressive muscle relaxation, and visual imagery, which is a fancy way to say, like, use your imagination to think about something that's not the perceived threat, to try to help use other areas of the brain to calm the amygdala and the threat response.
Yeah. I'm happy that you mentioned that this is a practice, because we've had lots of authors on who write books about grief or anxiety or whatever issue, that crisis moment that might be in a kid's life. And I find bibliotherapy is great. However, I think the time to buy a book about grief, yeah, maybe it's when grandma dies or the dog dies, great. But if you had been talking about that book earlier when everything was, and just talking about the feelings, that kind of gives the kid some practice. So when it does happen, it's like, oh, we're not trying to rebuild this kid after the kid's fallen apart. It's like, oh, the kid already has some idea about this, and we can deal with this together.
Absolutely. I mean, so if you think about any other thing that we're asking people to do in their lives, like if, let's say you are a child, like a youth baseball player, right? And to feel like you can play your best, you have to build your muscles. You have to create like sort of muscle memory of getting around the bases, doing what you have to do. You're hitting, you're staying engaged. If you just went up to like a 10-year-old and said, hey, I know you've never played baseball before, but today I expect you to pitch. And I also we really want to beat this team. So do your best. I want you to hit as hard as you can, get a few home runs. That'd be fantastic. Like nobody would ever actually do that. And it's sort of the same with it's muscle memory. Your brain is not a muscle, but it's sort of the idea of that, right? Like you create patterns of thought in the same way that you build muscle to be able to do the thing that you need to do when you need to do it. So the reason the practice is so important is that you have to have confidence and fall back on strategies, even when your brain is telling you danger, 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 danger. You have to raise your hand and speak in class, or you really want to because you know the answer, but you're hot and sweaty and your breath is quick because your brain thinks that all those kids around you and your teacher and somewhere in that room, there's a hawk and you're a mouse. And if you dare to stick your hand up just even a little bit, you're going to die. That is what the brain is saying. It's the survival mode kicking in. And you can't, kids do. They run out of the classroom, hit, fight back. That happens too. One of the biggest misperceptions is that anxiety looks always like hiding, the freeze response, like hiding under a desk or like being really quiet. Sometimes anxiety looks like fighting because that's one of the main ways that we survive. So we are seeing unprecedented levels of this type of behavior in preschools right now. The hitting, the biting, the kicking, the swearing. I do a lot of teacher training work to kind of get right into the heart of this process of the threat response and what is going on in the child. How can we identify the need that's driving this behavior? And how can we manage our own threat response? Because it's hard to work with a kid that's doing that, right? And if your own threat response goes up, now you're both could be in fight response mode, or you could both be in freeze and doing nothing. So it's a practice because it has to become a natural response, because the threat response is a natural response and it's our default.
Yeah.
For some people more than others. Yeah.
I'm really happy that you pointed out to us that sometimes, maybe lots of times, anxiety looks like fighting.
Yes.
Because I think I think that's the last thing people will think. It's like my beautiful wife taught in the Boston Public Schools for 34 years as a special needs teacher, and she would oftentimes have kids just out of the blue turn over the desks or the chairs, and that was always treated as this is a behavior, this is a bad behavior, and none of the administrators that came down to help ever sat down and said, well, maybe this kid's stressed out and anxious, and maybe we can deal with this in a different way.
Right. 100%. If we understand the need, we know better what to do. If we only address the behavior, we're looking at the very tip of the iceberg, right? Like you can only see this. You can't see what's happening in the brain. I often wonder if someday, because the technology is advancing so quickly, I don't know, I picture it like when I was little, occasionally I had really strict viewing limits, which is why one reason I worked at Sesame Street, because I watched it until I was like 12. I was only allowed to watch PBS, but I occasionally got the Jetsons, right? And, I would think like, world's not possible, so far-fetched. Imagine a time that we would actually walk around with some scan of our brain, like in real time. And you would be able to see, like if you came to me and I was really dysregulated and I was screaming, whatever, you would be able to see, oh, her amygdala is lit up. Something is threatening her. This is a threat response. Maybe someone would act differently to that person if we could see what was happening, and we can't for now, right? But if we imagine we could, when I talk to teachers and sometimes parents about, if you know that a child has experienced something is extremely traumatic, and you're seeing these behaviors and you don't know how to connect the dots or whatever, just imagine the child was running up to you with like a giant cut on their arm, like actually bleeding. What would you do? You would treat that, right? You would look at that and you'd give attention to it. So just think about that like an internal injury. You can't see it, but the behavior might be trying to communicate about it. And how would you act differently? Like if you were thinking about it that way. We need to have some of these tricks to help us from going into our own, too far into our own threat response mode, like feeling threatened by the behavior. Because then once we're in threat response mode, it's hard, for the adult to calm down. And when I work with parents, they'll, screen time is one of the biggest battles everywhere right now. And parents will say, it makes me so mad. Like I've asked them to turn off the iPad 25 times, come back and again and again and again. I can't do anything about it. It's like until I get mad and scream and yell, like nothing changes. And I'll say like, well, what are you feeling when you're doing that? I'm thinking he just doesn't listen to me. I'm thinking I'm like, I know that's what you're thinking. What are you feeling? Anger. Let's peel back that onion. What's in the center of that? Fear. Why do you really care so much about the screen? I'm afraid it's going to destroy his brain. I'm afraid it's going to take over. It makes it so that we can't communicate. It all comes down to fear. The threat response comes up, and ultimately it comes down to a feeling of love and wanting to be the best parent that you can be, and feeling like if your child's doing this all the time, then you're not. So if we basically peel back the layers and try to look for what the real threat is, it's easier to kind of address it, using some of the strategies in the book, but also just through parents building understanding of what's going on in themselves. Yeah.
One of the things that I love about books is that they can be mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And obviously a kid in a family where a kid that is dealing with this anxiety, this is the perfect tool, perfect resource. But I also love that the book can be a window. And could you talk a little bit about what kind of conversations a family could have with a kid who's not necessarily dealing with a lot of anxiety themselves, but they might have a sibling or they might have a classmate that's dealing with it? How can How to Train Your Amygdala help them have a better understanding of the peers in their lives that are struggling with this?
Yeah, I mean, my hope is that the book is read to anybody. You don't have to have anxiety on a regular basis or have it be something that even anyone in the family is struggling with. It's really a picture book first. Mm-hmm. So it's a story. So I hope people will share the story, find that as they're reading the story together, they're practicing some of these strategies to help the amygdala. It also takes it outside of the child because you're trying to help the character that's talking to you from the page. And then it just creates, to your point, conversations about this is in everyone. Mm-hmm. It normalizes, all of us can go into this response, even if we don't feel like we're doing it on a regular basis. And so it also opens up an opportunity for maybe parents that have never really thought about their own brains to consider and maybe even talk about it with a child. Wow, I used to get so anxious when I was younger, and I never realized that, or even now, and I never realized that this is why. It's helping to educate so that when we ask a child to use a strategy to be calm in a classroom, to do something that we're asking them to do, we have this little bit of neuroscience, right? A little bit of understanding of what's happening that we can't see. Mm-hmm. What's happening in our brains. Yeah.
I think that's so important. And I love the idea of sharing with your kids. Wow, I kind of felt like that when I was a kid. One of the pieces of advice I give to young parents all the time is get off that pedestal that your kids are putting you on, that you're perfect and you know everything. Admit you make lots of mistakes and you made lots of mistakes. Let them see how human you are.
Definitely. Yep. And there's a section at the back of the book that's all for adults. That's it's sort of how to tune into yourself first and then think about what your child might need, and also give some of those tips. Anxiety doesn't always look like withdrawn behaviors. It doesn't always look like freeze. And I love using analogies with parents and kids together. I think there's a lot of work that's great that's being done right now in schools and that trickles into homes around why is breathing to be calm. Okay. But why does that actually work? Right? Mm-hmm. I think, and the reason it works is because if you pause to take a really long series of long, deep breaths, the neurofeedback, the message to the brain is, we can't possibly be being actually chased by a lion right now, because we would never stop to breathe like this.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it works. And I sometimes think we teach the skill without the how or the why. And I think it can be more effective if you understand I'm not just being told to breathe for the sake of breathing, or because that's the latest thing to talk about, right? There's a reason, a purpose behind it. And then if I can picture that happening, if I can picture that if I'm breathing like this, I can almost imagine this part of my brain slowing down and becoming calm, because the message I'm sending to it is, we would not be doing this.
Right.
If there was a lion charging at us, we would be running as fast as possible, or we'd be trying to fight back, and we wouldn't be sitting here and casually breathing. And that's why it works to reset the whole central nervous system.
Yeah. I love that idea of helping kids understand how their body, how their brain works. It makes perfect sense. And that's probably why we don't do it that often. It makes too much sense.
Well, science is just catching up. Like, science is always catching up with human development, and then neuroscience is catching up with science, right? Because we haven't really been able to look at brain function in a very clear way since the mid 1990s. So there's just, it makes sense to me that we stop teaching as much about function at the collarbone up, because we know more about the heart. Mm-hmm. Kids know where their heart is. They know it beats. They know it, pumps blood around their body. I really look forward to a point in time when they might have as much information about how their brain works as well.
So any plans to write a sequel and maybe How to Train Your Hippocampus?
The publisher asked me about that. What's so funny is that I would love to, and maybe we will. Maybe there's a story somewhere, and then maybe someone else will. The word amygdala is super fun to say, and there's so much character depth. And I think you could do the same thing with the hippocampus, but it's not the same usual suspect. It doesn't have the same depth of character. Like the amygdala it's like powerful and strong and like superhero-like, but it's also tiny, and it's also super sensitive. It's like, it's got all these nuances to it that made it easier to kind of imagine it as a story when I laid awake at night during the pandemic thinking about the story.
That must have been a lot of fun, just kind of coming up. And again, I go back to the kitten delivering the pizza. That's just a perfect image.
It was the least threatening thing I could picture. And if you get the book, listeners will see that the kitten, Cynthia Cliff, who did the illustrations, is just fantastic. And she made the kitten look as non-threatening as possible. I mean, it's small, it's timid. It ends up appearing in every page, which was my editor, Cassie Sitzman's ideas, genius also. So you can kind of do an I Spy looking for the kitten, which is calming, too, to do that process and be focused on looking for something as sweet and calm as a little kid. I do have another book coming out, but not until summer of 2026. And it's got a little bit of a different, same publisher and a different theme. Yeah.
Well, you have an open invitation to come back in 2026, but I hope you write another book early so you can come back a little bit earlier.
I would love to.
Hey, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you who your favorite Muppet was.
Definitely, if I had to choose one, it's always so hard, but I'm going to go with Grover. Okay. He's fantastic. I mean, he's just also has so much depth, like so curious, so lovable, makes mistakes, and just like, if I was going to go out for coffee with one of them, I would choose Grover.
Awesome. Well, we should tell everybody where they can go to find out more about How to Train Your Amygdala and find out more about you.
Oh, so I have a website. It's annahousleyjuster.com, and people can connect with me there because you can click on the envelope and email me. And the book is available on Amazon, but it's also available at a lot of local bookstores. And I like to encourage people to go to their local independent bookstore and ask about it. But if not, it's also available both on Barnes & Noble and on Amazon.
Yeah, and go request it at the library. Go and request it at your independent bookstores, because just imagine how much fun you're going to have seeing the person behind the desk sit down and try to say, what's the name of the book? How to Train Your what?
And then maybe it starts a conversation. Maybe that person at the bookstore never really realized why they get anxious about these specific moments, and maybe they'll look it up, and then it's a little moment of education. I love it. It's a great idea.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of How to Train Your Amygdala. Our guest has been Dr. Anna Housley-Chester. Anna, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids. Will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. Until then, please connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, at Jedley Magic on X, our YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids, and our website, readingwithyourkids.com. This episode made you smile and gave you something to think about? Please share a link to the show with someone you love. Leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the show wherever you find your favorite shows. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful, starting with our guest, Kimberly Behre Kenna. Please be sure to check out Lola Gillette and the Summer of Second Chances. Also want to thank Dr. Anna Housley-Chester. Please be sure to check out How to Train Your Amygdala. I want to thank my team, Chris Doherty, Jackson Sotolara. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better, kinder, more empathetic place. And you do that every single time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.